Hey guys, this is Pablo. I'm still in Kawaguchi, Lake Kawaguchi at the foot of Mount Fuji. And I wanted to make a video about a little quip that came to mind a couple of days ago while walking around Tokyo. And it was about the relationship between being and existence. So there's been a lot said about this, right? And nothing new is kind of a mix of what I've come to understand through reading some developmental psychology and also putting into practice some of the sort of trauma release and emotion release type of work that is now found, pretty much everywhere on the internet. And so I learned that the fundamental mechanism of the creation of trauma is something called splitting and projection. So our entire egoic mental structure is built on the fact that very early in our lives, when we were just a few months old, we needed to use a split defense to ward off the fear of separation from our mother. So there comes a point in an infant's life when you come to the horrifying realization that you are in an enormous world full of nasty things like pointy edges and gravity, and you are this vulnerable little bag of fluids that aches when poked, right? Now, those two things don't, and your motor skills are just like dreadful. So, you put those things together and you find yourself in a rather precarious situation. And at that moment, the mind is forced to create a mental world with a mental you that separates from the actual. Because there's no other way to stay afloat mentally other than to do that, actually, right? So it's the logical and healthy developmental human thing to do. Now, unfortunately, this is a temporary stage that needs to be at some point or ought to be outgrown, but is rarely actually outgrown unless one engages in some serious type of work. And this is all interesting because there are different reasons why we split from the real world and from our real self. I just mentioned one, that's the primary one. It has to do with development, normal human development. But once the mind learns that it can keep splitting away from reality and disassociating, it becomes egoic. It becomes fundamentally egoic. That is to say, it becomes fundamentally avoidant and schizoid. So the ego is a schizoid, avoidant defense mechanism at its core. It is nothing but separation from what's up, and that's of course not a healthy, ultimately not a healthy way to live. So you could imagine being, actuality, as what is. Let's just call it what is, right? And ego and the reality seen through egoic eyes, you could see that as existence, right? So being just is, but existence sort of stands out. So existere means to stand out. And nothing can stand out unless there is the separation that takes place in the mind. When separation doesn't take place in the mind, things just are. When the splitting ego or schizoid defense takes place, things split and there is a existence. And that split creates the subject-object illusion that our minds default to once that happens. So once the mind catches on to this mechanism, it finds it very convenient to just keep inventing worlds and concepts and realities and identities that allow it to exist in a wholly mental world without ever having to touch base with what is. because that becomes just too painful. And um, now the mind doesn't do that willy nilly. It mostly does that with things that it doesn't like, right? So once the mechanism gets going, there's things you like, there's things you don't like, and the valence or the intensity of the like and dislike create a stronger desire and aversion for things. And that desire and aversion is what triggers the mind to then start to make things really stand out and be more strongly committed to memory as things that need to be either chased or avoided. So you could, in that sense, say that both very pleasant and unpleasant experience are traumatic. And here, trauma, we are not saying something bad that happened to you. Here, we are redefining trauma as something that didn't get processed, something that didn't get digested. So the quip that I didn't get mentally digested, that is. So the quip that I came up with the other day in my head was that existence is being, having indigestion, right? So there's being, just being itself, and whenever something doesn't get digested, it suddenly exists, right? And therefore existence is a lack of digesting being, either because we don't have the level of awareness to do so, mostly because we don't have the level of awareness to do so. It doesn't feel safe um, to just let that event be. And of course, the spiritual work, or the work of meditation and embodiment and all these kind of disciplines, and especially trauma release, is nothing other than digesting undigested experience, right? So when you digest the experience that was split, it becomes being once again. It gets reintegrated into this undifferentiated thing that just is. Unfortunately, we spend the larger part of our lives undigesting things, committing things to memory, getting our emotions amped up, chasing for one thing, trying to avoid another. And that mechanism is very strongly ingrained in us. And so long as that is the case, so long as we are driven by desire and aversion, we keep creating an enormous amount of existence, more existence, more existence, more existence, more identity. And so it takes a huge amount of work to digest all that existence and to bring it back into being, bring it back, bring it back, bring it back, right? You could almost go as far as to say that the entire spiritual practice is one of digesting undigested experience so that it can just be, right? An experience once digested need not exist anymore. It doesn't even need to be in memory. You probably even forget about it. And the easiest way to notice this is there are things that used to either scare the hell out of you when you were a kid or really catch your attention. And at some point, you digested those experiences and now you don't even look at them anymore. You just kind of do it, right? I mean, probably the first time you tried to ride a bicycle, you were like really, really scared and you had to use like the little wheels, or maybe your parents had to help you out. Uh, I can hardly think of an adult now that, especially in Amsterdam, just takes a bicycle and goes, right? So the experience has been fully digested, and therefore it just is. You don't, it doesn't catch your attention all that much. That sounds pretty obvious, right? However, that's a trivial example. When the example has a certain emotional weight to it, such as the death of a loved one, a certain separation, the loss of a business, things of that kind, suddenly you go like, yeah, but this is not just riding a bicycle, this has real meaning. Well, it does, and that's valid. You don't want to pretend that it doesn't, but you also want to understand that it must be fully digested for your mental health to return to, and for you to actually get on with your life. So yeah, so that's what I wanted to share in this video, is this idea of existence being undigested being, and that our job is to become really good at mentally and somatically digesting things, and to become a very good funnel through which perception can just go through, right? That nothing gets caught, because you are very good at just allowing, right? That's essentially the big part of the practice in daily life. You can also have a formal practice in which you sit in silence and allow undigested things to start popping up, um, and then clean those out. And you could go into even more aggressive modalities, such as TRE, or any kind of somatic trauma release modality, diaphragmatic massage, or those kind of things. You could even amp it up to holotropic breathwork, psychedelics, things of that kind. All of those are meant to digest things, right? Digest experience that has been caught in the mental and somatic matrix that you are, and is kind of stuck, and not allowing things to flow through. So I hope that makes sense, and I hope to be back with more. Cheerio.